In today's video, we are going to talk about something known as the dark tetrad, and it essentially comes out of the dark triad. Now, the reason I wanted to do this video is I wanted to help you differentiate between if somebody just has an insecurely attached style in a relationship, or if they might actually have characteristics that are more likely to be associated with the dark tetrad. And the reason this is so valuable is that dark tetrad relationship dynamics can be really dark. They can actually be very unhealthy. And they're the type of things that if I were working with people when I was running my practice, if I saw these things come out in a one-to-one session, it wouldn't be let's work through these different challenges. Let's, recondition our attachment styles, learn to communicate differently. It wasn't this like, this let's just fix these things up and heal and we can see this healthy relationship dynamic occur. It would more so be, hey, these are dangerous traits. These are things that can actually be associated with literal trauma if you stay in the relationship with this person. And in the case that I would see somebody dating somebody with a lot of dark tetrad personality traits, I would be encouraging them to leave the relationship rather than encouraging them to heal the relationship. So I'm going to go through what the dark tetrad is in this video. I'm going to talk about some of the differences between traditional attachment style dynamics versus dark tetrad qualities or characteristics. And I want you to sort of take in this information and see how this may apply to your loved ones or somebody in your life so you can make a conscientious decision about how to really show up and interact with that person. So, if you're like, what is all of this? The dark tetrad is a concept in psychology that essentially refers to a group of characteristics or personality traits that are much more so associated with harmful, negative, or undesirable behaviors, especially socially and interpersonally. Now, the reason this actually came about is there's something known as the five-factor model of personality. It's very common. It's been around for quite some time, very well studied, very research-based. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the ocean model, and it's essentially used to measure personality traits that somebody has to sort of understand that person's persona. And this, the ocean model is an acronym. It stands for openness, conscientiousness. E is for extroversion, A is for agreeableness, and N is for neuroticism. And you'll essentially see that these characteristics, if somebody scores high on neuroticism and high on agreeableness, they may have a certain personality type if they score lower on the other ones, or if somebody scores very high on openness and extroversion, you may see what that kind of persona would be for somebody. So, there was this model, and eventually psychologists, I believe the psychologists were out of the University of British Columbia, and they came along and said, well, there's other personality traits that are very meaningful on sort of the darker side of things that are not being studied. And it actually originally started out as the dark triad, which was Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. And then later, a fourth characteristic was added here called sadism. And I'll go through and explain what each of these are, and then I'll give some sort of examples and expressions of them so you can see if you may know somebody in your own life who may have some of these qualities or traits. So Machiavellianism is essentially a personality trait characterized by sort of a cunningness, a manipulation, and essentially somebody who's expressing Machiavellian traits is trying to constantly exploit other people for their personal gain. So they may be willing to use like lying, deceit, flattery, manipulation, basically to manipulate an outcome. So to get their own needs or ends met. And with Machiavellian people, you may see the type of personality who's kind of conning their way through things. They may see people less as somebody to empathize with and as their own human being that is sort of sacred and worth caring for, and instead as somebody that they can exploit. How can I sort of take advantage of the situation? That may be their relationship to it. And so that's our sort of Machiavellian trait. You would see things like this person is willing to flatter somebody into manipulating them, lie. They look for people's pain points and pressure points and try to sort of exploit those essentially. Then we have narcissism. Now, narcissistic traits are essentially characterizes this having this grandiose sense of personal importance, right? So this person may need, an excess of attention, of admiration, and they may struggle to empathize with other people. But the big pieces that we're looking for when it comes to the dark tetrad is the narcissism qualities are most so associated with this need for status, attention, to be seen as special, unique, and to just require this excessive admiration all the time. So that's sort of our narcissism part. Then we have psychopathy. And psychopathy, as we get into psychopathy and sadism, they become a little scarier, to be quite honest. So we're seeing psychopathy in the dynamic of really lacking any kind of remorse. So you may see, for example, somebody with psychopathic traits can do something that's harmful to somebody else and literally not regret it, not feel guilt, not feel remorse, just like be cold about it. And they may not even have any kind of like empathy. They may be really, distinctly lacking in moral conscience. And so somebody with psychopathic traits is going to end up expressing themselves in a different way in terms of their persona than somebody with narcissistic traits, Machiavellian traits. However, it is important to note that these things often go together. These trait groupings often go together in different cases, but they would look different if, for example, you saw somebody who was very Machiavellian, but not very narcissistic or psychopathic, or if somebody's got really strong narcissistic qualities. You can sort of start differentiating some of these things to see if somebody may be antisocial personality disorder, which is essentially psychopaths and sociopaths, or if they're more governed by their narcissism, they may be more likely to have narcissistic personality disorder, and so forth. So you can start to sort of make these distinctions. Now, the fourth one is sadism is if somebody essentially derives actual like pleasure or enjoyment from seeing somebody else in pain. And so individuals with these sorts of sadistic traits may actually engage in like very aggressive behavior or cruel behavior and derive some sort of positive personal benefit or enjoyment from it. So this is where, like, if we're talking about attachment styles versus these traits, I mean, we go down a completely different path in the discussion. And, sometimes I'll see comments on YouTube here where people will say, they'll talk about a specific attachment style and then they'll describe things that are not just about attachment styles. They'll describe qualities or characteristics of how somebody's treating them that are much more manipulative or much more cunning, Machiavellian, or much more narcissistic or really lacking remorse. That's part of why I really wanted to make this video. And I think that it's important to take a look at some of these ways that these dynamics can affect relationships. So I'm going to go into that for just a moment here. If you are with somebody who just has an insecurely attached style, it doesn't mean that there won't be hurt caused. Okay. Obviously, I say this all the time, trauma is essentially contagious. It's not contagious in like a germ theory way, but it is still contagious. It's contagious in the sense that if you are in proximity to somebody with a lot of their own trauma, that will be spread and will affect you over time if there isn't a resolution happening, if there isn't growth happening, if there isn't a change in the pattern for how you're interacting with that person that can take you away from that space. So, for example, if you are an anxious, preoccupied person, and you are dating somebody with another insecurely attached style, over time, if you're not seeing growth, if you're not seeing commitment or change or resolution, it will hurt and it can affect you. It can make you feel more anxiously attached. So this is where we have to set those deadlines in relationships. You hear me talk about this on this channel all the time. Like, don't just stay in a relationship if it's not working. Assess what your needs are. Set a deadline. If you don't see the needle move, in a period of time that's reasonable, and you get to sort of set that. Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it 5 weeks? Then it's time to decide if it's the appropriate measure to walk away. Now, that's with attachment styles. If you have a different attachment style, we want to be working on communicating differently, setting boundaries differently, reconditioning our core wounds. We want to be working on making sure that we are, changing our behaviors, especially if they are to activate or to deactivate, right? We want to be working on those really important things. With somebody who has dark tetrad traits, the cost is a lot higher for sticking around. Okay. The cost, and I will say, by the way, if you want to do a deep dive into some of this stuff, I have a course and you can just check it out fully for free, for 7 days. And it's all about breaking free from a narcissistic relationship and actually healing from it, because there's a different impact that is had from somebody with dark tetrad traits versus somebody with an insecurely attached style. a night and day different impact. And some of the things that you'll be seeing coming out of a relationship with somebody who's very high on the dark tetrad sort of, or dark triad, excuse me, characteristics or qualities, is you are likely to see a greater chance of having something like CPTSD. Okay, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because these individuals are not doing relationships from the same space. And again, I will say, because I think it's important to note this, that people with dark tetrad qualities or characteristics in their personality are very, very wounded, right? They come from their own substantial degree of trauma, basically with the exception of psychopaths, because psychopaths are born and sociopaths are made, right? They happen through conditioning and trauma. Psychopaths, they are born as a psychopath, right? Different sides of amygdala, for example, different sort of genetic characteristics, or nature versus nurture. So with that small exception, and it still sort of puts them in this space where they can cause a degree of trauma. I will also say, as an exception, it's also important to note that there can actually be relatively healthy psychopaths in society, because if psychopaths get a very secure upbringing, even though they're biologically a psychopath, they can grow up in a secure upbringing. And even though they may struggle to empathize or feel guilt or regret or remorse, they can also understand logically, the benefit of rules in society. And if they can sort of intellectualize their empathy, if they if they grow up in a healthy space. If they don't grow up in a healthy space, then we can sort of get a much unhealthier side of these individuals. And if we are in proximity to somebody like this for a long period of time, it can be very, very painful. It can be very damaging, unfortunately. It can cause a lot of trauma in a lot of different places and ways. And so it's really important to recognize, if you're seeing a lot of these things, that one of the best things you can do is create healthy boundaries. If you can have some space between yourself and this person, and if you can make sure that you're able to, you know, protect yourself from your boundaries, go no contact is a great idea if you're in a romantic relationship with somebody. It's not the type of romantic relationship you probably want to stay in. And when we can understand these qualities versus somebody who communicates in unhealthy ways, or stone walls because they're triggered, or is a little bit hot and cold sometimes, there's a big night and day difference here. So I really wanted to share this because I felt like it might be helpful for anybody who's researching attachment styles and then may actually need to come to the realization that what they're experiencing is beyond just attachment styles with somebody, and may sort of go into these dark tetrad traits. I will say, as the last sort of caveat here, is that somebody can be they can have these characteristics or qualities, right? Somebody can have narcissistic traits, but not be a full-blown narcissist. Okay. Somebody can have Machiavellian traits, and somebody can have psychopathic traits and not be a psychopath or have ASPD. But, as we get into psychopathy and sadism, again, it's sort of a different beast here, right? To conquer, where there may be, much more damaging sort of qualities and characteristics. And even if somebody has psychopathic traits, I want you to imagine what it's like to be in a relationship with somebody who's truly able to hurt and not feel remorse. Like, how could that person really uphold their commitments in a relationship and their side of what they are, supposed to be investing in, unless they, have been doing a tremendous, tremendous amount of work and healing and all these sorts of things, which is essentially pretty much unheard of in the vast majority of these cases, with very, very few exceptions. So again, my big piece of advice is, if you're seeing that somebody you're dating or in a relationship with has these qualities or characteristics, please treat it differently than somebody who may just have an insecurely attached style, because there really is a night and day difference. So anyways, and also I'm really excited to share with you that we've actually been working on an app for quite some time, and we're going to be launching that as well. So if you want to come in, check out our new app that we have to take all of your PDS courses from, and all of the new exciting features and benefits in there, check it out. That will also be included when you click the link down below. That was the video for today. My intention here was to really just look out for anybody who may be researching about something and have placed it in this idea of attachment theory, but may actually be much deeper. And I hope this was helpful to you. If you have more questions about this, or if you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel, hit the like button. Whatever videos have the most likes, I tend to try to create more content around. And thank you for stopping by. Thank you for watching and for being here. And I look forward to seeing you in future videos.